In this video, we're going to talk about domain name registration. Now, if you're completely new to websites and you're not entirely sure what a domain name is or why you need one or what you should call yours, then go ahead and pause this video, and I'm going to link to documentation below, and it's going to give you a little bit of information about the basics of domain names, why you need one, and I'll throw in some tips and some links to resources about choosing the domain name for your website. For everybody else, before we go through the domain registration process, I do want to talk a little bit about the situations where you may want to skip this step, because this is actually an optional tutorial depending on your situation. The first situation where you may want to skip it is if you're just using LattePress to learn how to build websites, but you're not actually intending to bring a website live, then you're not going to need one to go through these tutorials and the process. And the next step, when we pick our hosts, each host that we cover actually offers us a staging URL or a temporary website address that we can use while we're putting in our functionality and building our pages. So if your intent is just to learn, then you're not going to need a domain name. The second situation, and this may be an obvious one, is if you already own a domain name, you don't need to purchase a second one. You can go ahead and use the options below to skip this step and go into our hosting portion. The third situation is if you're just not ready to purchase a domain name yet. As I mentioned previously, you can go through the whole process without actually having a domain name. So if you don't know what your domain name is going to be yet, or you're just not ready to spend the money on the name, then you can skip this step. The only thing I want to mention is that if you have a domain name in mind and it is currently available, go ahead and snatch it up as quickly as possible, because domain names do get registered at a very rapid pace. And even if you don't think anybody else would want your name, you'd be surprised at the domain names that are registered. So if you have a business in mind and that domain name is available, then I really do recommend you going through this tutorial and snatching that name up as quickly as possible. So for everybody that's ready to register a domain name, I'm going to talk about that process now. The company that we recommend is Gandhi.net, and the reason that we recommend them is that they have a very, very simplified interface for updating your DNS information. Now, your DNS information is basically telling the internet where your domain name should point and where your files are, and we're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff and integrating our domain with a CDN called Cloudflare and updating name servers. And so with Gandhi, that interface is so simple, it's very rare that somebody will actually run into a problem during those steps. In addition to that, they're a great company. You know, the pricing is pretty standard when it comes to domain name registration, but everything about the company is really great, and they do have this focus on kind of making the process as simple as possible. And so we do recommend that you register all of your domain names with Gandhi.net so we can keep all of our domain information in the same place. And I'm going to walk you through that process now. So the first thing I want to say is that there's a difference between domain name registration and hosting. It's two separate services that you can get from two separate companies. So we're going to take advantage of what we think is the best domain name registrar, which is Gandhi, and then we're going to cover hosts in the next step. Also things like SSL certificates and all these other things that come with websites. We're going to handle all of that later. So in this step, we're just going to register the domain name. To register your domain name through Gandhi, it's a fairly straightforward process. Now, if you're watching this video within the app, there's going to be an option below that says, yes, go ahead and register my domain name with Gandhi, and it's going to show you what I'm about to cover in step-by-step instructions. There'll also be a button there that says Open Gandhi, and if you enter Gandhi that way, it's going to have this search bar already pre-filled automatically with the site that you entered in when you filled out the create site form. So this should already be filled out for you, but if it's not, or if you're looking at this video from somewhere other than the LattePress app, just go ahead and type in your domain name that you want into this search bar. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in a domain that I hope is going to be free, and then click on this search button. This is going to bring up whether or not this domain is available. So if you see this green check mark, it means that your main extension or whatever you typed in is available. It's also going to give you some other options or alternatives, and it's going to do this whether or not the domain name is available. But if it isn't available, just keep searching until you find a domain that you like that is also available. If it is available, click on this little shopping cart icon here on the right, and that's going to add it to your cart. And then click on this checkout button. So the first part is going to be the shopping cart. So you're just going to make sure that your domain name here is selected, that we have it for 1 year. and it's going to go through what the totals are, and then click on checkout. Once you click on checkout, it's going to ask you to log in or sign up. So you can either log in if you already have an account. If you don't, just click on this create a free account button. And that's going to bring up a very easy to fill out sign up form. Just enter in your email address, select the username, select the password, and then agree to the terms and conditions and click on create. And then once you do that, it should bring you back to the shopping cart screen with, after you're logged in with your account. It's going to show you again the domain up here. It's going to ask you if you want to try simple hosting. You do not want to do that. It's going to have your billing information here. And then depending on which domain name and domain name extension, it's going to ask you to accept a couple terms and conditions. These are required to go ahead with the domain name registration. And then again, at the bottom, it's going to ask you to check out. And then on the second screen, it's going to again show you your total information, and it's going to give you a couple payment methods. So just select the payment method that you want to pay with, go through the checkout process, and you're done. Your domain name is registered. And that's pretty much where you're going to leave it for now. We're not going to touch our domain name again until the launch tutorials. Once your domain is registered, go ahead and complete this tutorial and move on to hosting, and we'll go ahead and create a staging site and we'll get started on the actual training. So the domain name you're not going to need again until we get to the launch process, and we're actually going to bring our website live.